British TV host Holly Willoughby never suspected that she could have been the target of a chilling plan that was brewing in the dark corners of the internet. It all began with an unsettling post on a sinister forum, where users discussed the most disturbing abduction scenarios. Among them was a particularly active user named Big Bear, whose aggressive fantasies and chilling details about well-known public figures were enough to unnerve even the most hardened observers. However, this time, it wasn't just anonymous thrill-seekers paying attention to the forum. A law enforcement officer from the Iona Police Department in Minnesota, USA, was monitoring the activity, tracking potential criminals. What started as a routine surveillance quickly turned into a tense race against time. The user known as Big Bear stood out with his overtly aggressive tone and disturbingly detailed plans, making it clear that these were more than empty threats. It was a step toward committing a serious crime. Big Bear claimed to have the addresses of certain women he intended to target. Even more troubling, he admitted to attempting to bring his twisted fantasies into reality. The officer, who had been watching the forum, decided to establish contact with this individual under the alias David Nelson. The goal was to learn more about his plans and to prevent any possible tragic events. The correspondence between David and Big Bear went on for several weeks. During their exchanges, it became evident that one of the potential victims who had drawn Big Bear's attention was none other than Holly Willoughby. Her popularity and media presence made her the focus of a parasocial obsession, a case that illustrated how an innocent fascination could evolve into something far darker and more threatening. It turned out that Big Bear had been fixated on Holly for over 10 years. Now, he decided that fantasies were no longer enough. His goal was to carry out an abduction. Statements from Big Bear about being ready to act prompted David to take more assertive steps. Posing as a supporter and sympathizer, the officer maintained communication, building a trusting relationship with the individual. Throughout their conversations, Big Bear revealed details of his intentions. He not only had Holly's address, but was also gathering additional information to help him carry out the crime. His messages became more specific and menacing. At a certain point, it became evident that this was not just fantasy, but a real plan he intended to execute. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, law enforcement continued their surveillance of Big Bear's activities. A specially trained team of investigators worked on gathering evidence and coordinating actions to prevent the abduction. Over the course of several months, the agents tracked his every move, building enough of a case for an arrest. The efforts of law enforcement were focused not only on stopping Big Bear before he could harm anyone, but also on ensuring there was enough concrete proof to bring him to justice. Ultimately, they were able to intervene at the right time, ensuring that his threats would remain just that, and that Holly Willoughby, as well as others who may have been in danger, were kept safe. This case serves as a reminder of the thin line between admiration and obsession. While most fans admire their favorite celebrities harmlessly, there are instances when that admiration crosses into dangerous territory, requiring vigilance and action. Thanks to the swift intervention by law enforcement, a potentially horrific crime was averted, and Big Bear was brought into custody before he could act on his dangerous plans. Meanwhile, Holly Willoughby remained completely unaware of the disturbing plans being formed against her. She continued working, participating in various television shows, and enjoying her successful career. Thanks to the persistence and professionalism of the investigators, the suspect was ultimately unable to carry out his criminal intentions. The arrest of Big Bear marked the culmination of months of investigative work. When the investigators were finally ready, they conducted an operation to apprehend the suspect, thus preventing a potential tragedy. Due to their quick actions, the catastrophe was averted, and Holly remained unharmed. The case of Big Bear became a stark reminder of how parasocial relationships can escalate into dangerous obsessions. A seemingly ordinary forum for discussing fictional kidnapping scenarios turned into a platform where a real criminal plan began to take shape. The investigator who embarked on this journey by monitoring the forum eventually managed to gain the suspect's trust and gather enough information to thwart his intentions.
Police! Stay where you are! Do not touch anything!
You're under arrest for conspiracy to kidnap
Who?
Holly Willoughby.
I'm not going to lie, she's a fantasy of mine. I mean, she's a fantasy of a lot of guys, isn't she?
Gavin Plum, a 37-year-old man from Essex, had been planning the abduction of Holly Willoughby and her family for more than a decade. What began as fantasies gradually transformed into concrete plans in his mind. Monitoring Holly, collecting information about her whereabouts and interests, and constructing a dark scenario, all of this was part of a hidden life unknown to those around him. Officer Nelson, who was overseeing the situation, received a lead through online resources. Gavin, under the alias Big Bear, had been discussing his plans. This was made possible through David, who, after gaining Gavin's trust, started to receive more and more explicit confessions about his intentions. Gavin trusted David so much that he even shared details of his plan, which involved abducting Holly from her own home. When Gavin's original accomplice backed out, he found himself on the verge of failure. He needed a partner to carry out his scheme. David, pretending to be interested, offered to help. Gavin believed in his sincerity and even sent a video of his so-called abduction kit, which consisted of cheap equipment: handcuffs, ropes, gags, ankle restraints, and a number of metal cable ties. He was preparing to use this equipment to fulfill his dark plans. David knew the information he had could help prevent a crime. He decided to deepen Gavin's trust by sending him a fake screenshot of a flight supposedly planned from the United States to the United Kingdom. This convinced Gavin, and he revealed his full name, Gavin Plum, and that he lived in Essex, northeast of London. This information was handed over to the local authorities, which allowed them to initiate an investigation. The Essex police, after receiving the information from their U.S. counterparts, began monitoring Gavin's online activity. His posts, messages, and interactions on the internet provided enough evidence to warrant his arrest. The operation was documented by the police. The footage showed officers arriving at Gavin's residence and taking him into custody, informing him that he was being arrested on suspicion of conspiring to abduct Holly Willoughby. During a search of Gavin's home, authorities discovered a significant amount of evidence suggesting his obsession with Holly. The house was in a state of disarray. Food wrappers, beer cans, and dirty surfaces painted a picture of complete chaos. Amidst the clutter of various devices and hard drives, the investigators found the primary source of evidence: Gavin's computer. The computer contained not only a large number of images of Holly, but also deep fakes generated with artificial intelligence. Some of these were of an explicit nature. This evidence showed that Gavin's interest in Holly went beyond a mere fascination, crossing into a disturbing obsession that posed a real threat to her safety. Authorities realized that this fixation hadn't developed suddenly. It had been preceded by a long period of surveillance and planning. Gavin was detained and taken to the station where he was formally charged. He seemed confused, not understanding how his plans had been uncovered or by whom. As the investigation continued, using his computer and personal devices, even darker details began to emerge. Everything stored on the hard drives and memory devices indicated that his fantasies had long since crossed the line into unacceptable territory. Officer Nelson, who was closely monitoring the case, recognized that timely actions had prevented a potentially devastating crime. In early 2018, Gavin appeared in a BBC documentary about his struggles with obesity. At that time, he weighed around 490 pounds, which made his daily life severely restricted and mostly sedentary. He worked as a security guard at the Pinnacles Mall in Harrow and was known among colleagues for being reserved and preferring to keep a low profile. The documentary seemed to promise a turning point in his life, highlighting his challenges and perhaps providing a new incentive for change. But no one could have anticipated that Gavin's name would later emerge in a much darker context. For many years, Gavin lived in his hometown of Harrow, a suburb of London where he grew up. He rarely left the area and was one of 4 sons in a seemingly typical family. Gavin grew up in a house with his mother and stepfather, along with his brothers, who played outside after school and on weekends. However, Gavin's childhood was far from carefree. He was constantly bullied because of his weight, which eventually led to him becoming a withdrawn person, lacking self-confidence. In 2006, Gavin was first reported for stalking a woman, whom we will call Maria. This was one of the earliest indications of his alarming behavior towards women. After Gavin's arrest in 2022, Maria decided to come forward about her experience in an effort to support others who had been affected by his actions. This incident, years ago, foreshadowed Gavin's subsequent run-ins with the law, serving as an early warning sign that many had unfortunately ignored. The issue involving deepfake technology reached a critical point in Gavin's life over the past few years. In 2023, over 10,000 images and videos were found on his devices, including inappropriate content made using deepfakes. These images were created using photos of women he knew or had photographed himself, uploaded into a program. One of the most shocking aspects was that Gavin made explicit images using the faces of his neighbors and random passers-by. He even kept a list of over 130 women he fantasized about, including Holly Willoughby, who topped his list. Neighbors described Gavin as someone who always seemed odd. They knew he spent time sitting by his window, watching women and neighbors passing by. But no one suspected the obsessive nature behind his behavior. He took numerous pictures directly from his home window in Harrow, Essex County, photographing women and later using these photos to create deepfakes. Gavin never identified himself as part of any group associated with misogynistic beliefs, such as incels. However, many who knew or interacted with him believed his actions and mindset aligned with those of such groups. This left his motivations open to interpretation, but also explained his profound isolation from society and women in general. He lived a solitary life, consumed by his distorted fantasies about women he essentially had no chance with. Local residents remember Gavin as a teenager with poor grades, who often faced bullying due to his appearance. This only deepened his internal struggles, leading to further withdrawal. His adult life was marked by a series of odd jobs, the last of which was working as a security guard. Suffering from obesity, he spent most of his time at home, absorbed by his computer, which ultimately led him to create a large collection of fake images. The situation with deepfake content and the availability of programs to create such images has raised growing concerns. The technology allows anyone to create explicit images of a person within seconds using just a photo. This highlights the rising threats in the age of artificial intelligence. Gavin took full advantage of this, making his actions even more reprehensible. Gavin was always alone, and his interests revolved solely around fantasies involving women with whom he couldn't establish real relationships. A BBC documentary filmed in 2018 seemed like it could have been a turning point in his life, but instead, it drew even more attention to his issues and grim interests. Ultimately, it was his obsession and behavior that led to his arrest and the uncovering of disturbing details about his personal life. In December 2021, it was revealed that Gavin and Mark were planning to break into Holly's house. They found her address and devised an invasion plan. Holly lived there with her husband and 3 children, believing they were safe in their home. However, this twisted plan put the entire family at risk. Gavin and Mark intended to break into the house late at night and use a chemical to subdue everyone present. This was a crucial part of their plan, and the seriousness of their intentions was confirmed by evidence found by investigators. Bottles of chemicals were discovered in Gavin's apartment. Investigators also found audio recordings where Gavin went into detail about the actions they were planning to take. He explained that he chose nighttime when the chances of being detected were minimal and intended to use chloroform to completely incapacitate everyone in the house. The recordings were cold and emotionless, emphasizing the dangerous nature of the plan. Gavin's messages to Mark added more disturbing details. Gavin planned to make Holly record a video in which she would confirm that she left voluntarily and agreed to what was happening. This was an attempt to create an alibi in case things went wrong. However, it was all just a cover. Their true intentions were to humiliate Holly in front of her family and exploit her further. This part of the plan was crafted with particular cruelty, and the messages showed that Gavin was fixated on his fantasies. Gavin's obsession wasn't sudden. In 2008, 2 years before this, Gavin was caught attempting to abduct two 16-year-old girls. He specifically targeted young and vulnerable individuals to carry out his schemes. He managed to tie their hands and attempted to drag them into a storage room at a store. However, his plan failed when he was discovered in time. Despite this, Gavin faced no serious repercussions and remained free, which only increased his drive to turn his ideas into reality. The attempted abduction was a logical continuation of his prior behavior. A few years before that, Maria, a flight attendant, encountered him on a train. She was sitting alone when Gavin sat down across from her and handed her a note. Initially, she thought it was just a piece of paper and paid it no attention. However, he insisted, pushing the note closer until she read it. The note said, "Get off the train with me, stay quiet, do nothing, and no one gets hurt." He had a rope and a replica firearm with him, clearly indicating his intentions. Maria froze in fear and disbelief. She thought it might be a cruel joke, but when Gavin put his hand on her knee and gestured that they should get off at the next station, she realized it was serious. The station was in a small, isolated village, and Maria knew she would have no chance of escaping there. She began looking around, hoping to find someone to help, and made eye contact with another woman in the train car. The woman signaled a man nearby, and when they approached Gavin, he decided to flee. But that wasn't the last of him. A few days later, he tried something similar again, but failed once more. Despite 2 failed attempts, Gavin faced no legal consequences and remained free. These failures only deepened his fixation, driving him to find a victim who wouldn't be able to resist his threats. Gavin found solace online, where he connected with like-minded individuals and shared his fantasies. The internet became a space where his dark thoughts found resonance and support. This virtual community only fueled his obsession and motivated him to continue trying to bring his plans to life. That's how he met Mark, who shared his interests and was willing to help execute the plan to abduct Holly. They discussed every detail through messages, carefully planning each step to avoid mistakes Gavin had made before. This time, the plan was thoroughly thought out, and they were ready to go further than ever. It all began with Gavin Plam's arrest on October 4, 2023, when law enforcement discovered evidence of a conspiracy against well-known TV host Holly Willoughby. The investigation had been ongoing in secrecy for some time and involved an analysis of his online activity. It was Gavin's conversations with an undercover operative named David that ultimately led to his arrest. Gavin's plans were well detailed, although highly unrealistic. He had mapped out Holly's house, studied her routines, noted the locations of surveillance cameras, and intended to keep her in an abandoned slaughterhouse, where he planned to use the remaining equipment to carry out his cruel intentions. This location was meant to be the place where he intended to achieve his satisfaction. The investigation managed to gather extensive evidence of his intentions, including thousands of messages that Gavin had sent while discussing his plans. Many of these messages were sent to the undercover operative, who played the role of his accomplice. After analyzing the evidence, the court concluded that his intentions were serious and posed a real threat. Ultimately, he was arrested, and the investigation led to a significant trial. The prosecution brought 3 charges against him: incitement to commit a crime, aiding or abetting a kidnapping, and aiding or abetting aggressive assault. The case was so severe that for several months, investigators and prosecutors worked on it. analyzing materials seized from Plam's apartment, including personal notes, correspondence, and other items. Despite numerous efforts by the defense, the jury unanimously found Gavin guilty on all 3 counts. The judge, when delivering the sentence, emphasized that Gavin had harbored an unhealthy obsession with Holly Willoughby for many years. This obsession led him to plan her abduction, harm, and worse, as well as to threaten her family, her husband, and children. The judge also pointed out that Gavin had previously been convicted for threats of aggressive behavior towards 4 young women. This history played a key role in determining his risk to society. The court sentenced him to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years, after which he could apply for parole. The public did not remain indifferent. Gavin Plam's case became widely discussed in the media, sparking a wave of emotions and conversations about the issue of violence against women. The first known victim of Gavin, given a pseudonym, Maria, to protect her identity, spoke in an interview about how such situations affect perceptions of men in society. She highlighted that every woman is forced to be cautious, even if it's just about living next to a stranger. Women now have to evaluate men as potential threats, which has become an essential condition for their safety. When the public learned about the details of the conspiracy, Holly and her family found themselves at the center of attention. Despite the high level of security measures at home and in public spaces, the likelihood of Gavin's plans being carried out was extremely low, but the very existence of these threats was shocking to Holly. She chose not to comment on the situation and instead focused on her family, trying to cope with the aftermath of what had happened. Shortly after Plum's arrest, Holly made the decision to leave the morning show to dedicate more time to her personal life and safety. The legal proceedings against Plum lasted for several months, and by early July 2024, the prosecution was ready. Even though Holly was absent from the court sessions, she waived her right to anonymity and submitted a statement to the court on the impact Plum's actions had on her life. The statement remained confidential, but the judge confirmed that the incident had caused significant harm to her well-being. Plum attempted to provide false testimony during the trial, but the jury quickly saw through his lies. The evidence included thousands of messages sent by Plum, as well as his personal notes, which revealed that his intentions went far beyond mere threats. They were meticulously thought-out plans. The judge noted that Plum was prepared to go to extreme lengths to fulfill his twisted fantasies, making him extremely dangerous. This case once again demonstrated how far someone could go when driven by unhealthy obsessions. Plum had planned to abduct Holly, assault her, and harm her family, including her husband. Despite the physical challenges and unrealistic nature of his plans, he remained determined, which contributed to the breakdown of his relationship with his first accomplice, Mark. The public also witnessed a pivotal moment when Holly chose to waive her right to anonymity. This allowed for a thorough legal process and drew attention to issues of misogyny and aggression against women. Despite the emotional toll she had endured, Holly found the strength to participate in the pursuit of justice, setting an important example for many other women. The trial concluded with the jury unanimously finding Gavin Plum guilty. The judge reminded the court that Gavin had a prior criminal history and his actions toward Holly were further proof of the danger he posed to society. Based on all the gathered evidence and testimony, the court ruled that Gavin Plum should be isolated from the public to prevent any future tragedies. This incident serves as a reminder of the importance of recognizing such threats early and reinforcing safety measures to protect potential victims. The case of Gavin Plum underscores how crucial it is to take any signs of threat seriously and work towards preventing possible tragedies.